In this chapter, we're going to be looking at the different data types that are available in the Ruby language. And in this lesson, we're going to start off with the string data type. So let's get started by invoking the interactive Ruby shell. Strings can be formed in Ruby using either double quotes or single quotes. And any text, be it numbers, alphabetic characters, or other symbols that are found within the single or double quotes is considered string data. For example, here we've written name is assigned the value Jane using single quotes, so that Jane is created with single quotes, although you'll notice when Ruby returns the value of our assignment statement, Jane is in double quotes, because internally that's how Ruby always represents strings. We could have also written the same line using double quotes. So strings are formed using either single quotes or double quotes. Of course, a third way, which we learned in the last chapter, is to use getS to get the string interactively from the console. Now, not only does name have the value Jane, but getS automatically inserted a new line character, so that if we display name, Jane is shown, followed by the new line with our system prompt and the return value nil. There are other characters that can also be embedded in double quoted strings besides just the new line character. Let's take a look at one example. Here we embedded \T, which happens to be the tab character. So when we display the name, we get Jane followed by a tab, followed by Doe. Here's another example. \S represents the space character, as you can see when we display the return value. Of course, if we print it, we'll get the same result. Jane space Doe. One of the nice advantages of using double quoted strings over single quoted strings is that with a double quoted string, you can embed a single quote as an apostrophe. So for example, we could write so that the apostrophe is displayed, but if we tried to write that in a single quote, the value of str is going to be essentially nothing because we're in an error mode. So let me do a little exit here. So clearly you cannot embed single quotes in single quoted strings without using something called an escape. Here's how that works. Notice now the value of str is double quoted Jane, single quote S, or Janes. And if we display it, we get Jane apostrophe S. So single quoted strings work just like double quoted strings, but there are some limitations. You also cannot use the embedded characters like new line, space, and tab that we displayed earlier. Something else we can do with strings is create what are called here documents, which is just kind of a fancy way to create a multi-line string. Let me show you an example, but to do that, I'm going to go into a Ruby script. We're going to call the script here.rb. A here document starts out with two less than signs and some phrase or a code saying that when you see this code again, stop assigning data or string values to this variable. So for example, I'm going to come down to the next line, type in some text, like so. Then I'm going to end the text with the word here. Now let's print the value of words right after it's assigned the here document value. And let's see what we get. Notice that the value of words is the text that I typed after the here document began. Let's go back and look at the code again. So the text I'm highlighting right here is the value of the variable words. This makes an easy way to assign a large fragment of text to a single variable value without having to worry about wrapping around lines. Later on, I'll show you how you can continue a line, but for now, when you need to do that with long strings, just use here documents. Let's go back to the shell. Something else we can do with strings is split a string into separate values using a method called split along with the delimiter. Let me show you how that works. Let's work backwards. We have a string Jane, Doe. We're calling the split method. Here we're telling it that the delimiter is the comma. We use the slashes to delimit the delimiter, so to speak. Now, when this line is executed, each piece of text before delimiter is going to be assigned to its respective variable. So Jane will be assigned to first, and Doe will be assigned to last. So print first displays Jane, print last displays Doe. So split is a very useful method for taking a string and splitting it up into its parts. Another method we'll use quite often is called the squeeze method. Squeeze will remove trailing spaces from a string. Let's look at an example. Notice all the extra spaces I have in Jane. Then we have Doe. If I concatenate the two together, notice I get the large number of spaces between Jane and Doe. Looks like a tab is there. Now let's squeeze out the trailing spaces in the variable first. And I get Jane with one space and Doe. We could spend the whole chapter just looking at string functions and methods, and I don't want to go any farther than this for now. I'm just trying to give you an idea of how strings work in Ruby. And with that, we're ready to end this lesson and move on to the next lesson where we begin looking at numeric data types.